Just why is King Herod of the New Testament a type of the Antichrist? Actually, there are three King Herods that are a type of the Antichrist in the New Testament. We're going to look at that in this video. We've been working through a series on the religious sects of the Jewish people at the time of Christ, and those sects are the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Herodians. And we're going to take a detour to go look at Herod as a type of the Antichrist, but we recall that the Pharisees, they symbolize people today in the church that are proud, they're works-based, they're covetous people. The Sadducees, which is the sect of the priests, it represents those who serve the earthly church but really don't understand the Bible. And the Herodians, though, are the followers of King Herod. Those are those people who promote and follow a worldly, sinful king and not the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. We're going to go on in this video and we're going to understand King Herod, who the Herodians followed. Please consider subscribing to this channel. There's a little red button in the bottom right-hand corner. We've also done a previous series on the Antichrist, which is an extremely important series, and I'd urge you to watch the videos in that series. We saw that the Antichrist, the Antichrist is represented in many places in the Bible. The leopard beast of Revelation 13, the seventh head of the scarlet beast of Revelation 17, Gog, the man of sin, king of Babylon, the little horns in Daniel, the prince to come in Daniel 9, king of the north, prince of Tyre, and there's more, and we're going to add King Herod to that list. So we're going to look in this video at why King Herod is a type of the Antichrist. Just as a quick introduction, let's take a look at verse in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, that there is the Antichrist, but they have always been through the church age many antichrists that have gone out. Let's read 1 John 2:18. Little children, it is the last time. That represents the entire church age in the context of this passage. And as you have heard, that Antichrist shall come, which is the Antichrist, comes at the end of time, represented by all those types in the Old Testament. Even now, there are many antichrists. Many people through the church age have been opposed to Jesus as the Christ. Therefore, we know it's the last time. The Christ means that Jesus was the prophet, the priest, and king. People don't want to accept that or hear it, and therefore they become antichrist. But there is the Antichrist, that man of sin, that little horn of Daniel 7 and 8, that prince to come, the king of the north, the king of Babylon, all these types in the Old Testament. Note 2 Thessalonians, be not soon shaken in mind that the day of Christ is at hand, because there's two things that need to happen. That day shall not come except there come a falling away first, the apostasy, which we're already in now. But that man of sin will be revealed. That man of sin who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, which is a representation of the church. It's that wicked political religious leader at the end time, and that's what begins the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24. And I'll tag on this slide a whole series we've done on the Great Tribulation. Okay, now it's important to understand that an Antichrist is against Jesus as the Christ. The Christ means the one that's the Messiah, rubbed with oil, the anointed one, and in the Old Testament it's the prophets, priest, and king. Jesus is the ultimate prophet, the ultimate priest. The high priest is Jesus Christ, of course, and he is the King of Kings. Now the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herodians were all against those three things. For example, the Pharisees who sat in Moses' seat. Moses, of course, spoke of the prophet, which is Jesus Christ, although Moses was a prophet. The Pharisees thought that they sat in Moses' seat. They thought they were against Jesus Christ as the prophet. The Sadducees, which were the sect of the priests, the chief priests, who were the Sadducees, usurped the high priest, which is Jesus Christ. They were antichrist as well. The Herodians are followers of King Herod. They wanted to follow this worldly king, King Herod, rather than Jesus as the king. And we're going to see in this video that the Herods, there's three of them that we're going to look at, are all types of the Antichrist. Okay, so now we're going to look at how does one identify a type or a symbol of the Antichrist in the Bible. And the way that's done is that we take all of these common passages that we listed on the slide before, the little horns, the king of the north, the king of Babylon, the prince of Tyre, the man of sin, and we put them all together and we find common characteristics. We have a video which I'll tag on this slide on that. Please take the time to look at that. But we see these 5 key things. The Antichrist will be powered by Satan. The Antichrist is revealed during the Great Tribulation because that's when Satan is released from his prison. Because before that, he's bound for 1,000 years, which is a symbolic number. So the Antichrist is powered by Satan. His position is that he's a worldly, political, but he's also a religious leader. He combines the two together. The place that we can detect, especially from the Old Testament, is that he's from the Western world, the Greco-Roman culture. He has great pride. He desires worship. He wants to be as God. He loves it when people call him God. And the plan of the Antichrist, persecuting true Christians within the church. The Great Tribulation, by the way, is about tribulation on the church. And this plan of the Antichrist is to persecute Christ and his people. Lies and deception, sin and lawlessness, idolatry. Abomination of desolation means idolatry. It's the worship of Satan's kingdom. And that's what we're going to find, all of these things in King Herod, the 3 King Herods of the New Testament. Okay, and we see that these 3 King Herods, there's a Herodian dynasty. King Herod the Great, and then his son and his grandson. The 3 of them are all types of the Antichrist because they all meet these characteristics of the Antichrist in one way or the other. King Herod the Great was over Judea. He was actually called the King of the Jews until he was under the Roman Empire. He was still subservient to them until the Roman governors took over for him. He tried to kill Jesus, the infant Jesus, the baby. He wanted to kill him because the Magi told him that he was the King of the Jews. He did kill the infants in Bethlehem. The next Herod, which was his son, King Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee, which Jesus living in Nazareth was under his jurisdiction, he was the son. He's the one that killed John the Baptist. He sought to kill Jesus Christ. He was at the trial. Pilate handed Jesus over to Herod, and he mocked him. And he became a friend of Pontius Pilate in the trial and passion of Christ. Then the 3rd King Herod, we only find in Acts 12. There's another Agrippa later in Acts 26, which is a different situation. But King Herod in Acts 12, again, he killed James. He wanted to kill Peter, but Peter was rescued by angels. And he accepted worship as a god. People called him a god. He loved it, and God smote him for that. So we're going to look at these 3 King Herods in this video. Okay, so now we're going to go and we're going to look at the 5 characteristics of the Antichrist and how they are fulfilled by these 3 King Herods in the New Testament. So the first characteristic of the Antichrist is that the Antichrist is powered by Satan. We find in the Bible that Satan is bound for a symbolic 1,000 years, which is a period of time during the church age. We see in Revelation 23, he was cast into the bottomless pit, so he should deceive the nations no more, so that the gospel goes all through the world till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loose for a little season. That little season is the Great Tribulation. That's when Satan is loose and he gives his power and authority over to the Antichrist. And we see a couple of examples of that. The leopard beast of Revelation 13, the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his authority. And it's that leopard beast that the false prophet makes an image, a mark, and the number 666 that nobody can buy or sell, or rather function in the church, because this is a great tribulation in the church, if he has the image of the beast, the mark of the beast, or the number of the beast, 666. But we see in Revelation 13 too, the dragon gave him his power because he's loosed from his prison. Also, the little horn of Daniel 8, another type of the Antichrist. His power is mighty, but not by his own power, because he's run by the power of Satan. We see that on demonstration that Herod the Great, we recall that he sought to destroy Jesus after his birth, and that's actually talked about. Herod the Great is not by name, but in action. His actions are talked about in Revelation 12. Behold, a great red dragon, that's Satan, 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns on his heads, all symbolic meanings. And I'm going to tag a video we've done on that on this slide. And we have a whole Revelation series, by the way. His tail drew down the third part of the stars of heaven. He cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman, which is ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Well, that's what King Herod was doing. He was the one that was the messenger, if you will, of Satan, a type of the Antichrist, to devour the son. He was trying to kill Jesus Christ. She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. That's Jesus Christ. And her child was caught up into God and his throne at the resurrection. But we see another example of King Herod being powered by Satan. Because in Revelation 12 it says it's the dragon, but it's actually King Herod, the one that was fulfilling the dragon's will. We also want to look at the evil desires of the kings, Herod, the 3 kings. And we recall Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning. And we see all the King Herods. King Herod the Great tried to destroy Jesus. He did kill the infants in Bethlehem. King Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee, he desired to kill Jesus. He killed John the Baptist. King Herod, also known as Agrippa I, the Herod of Acts 12, he killed James the Apostle, and he wanted to kill Peter because they are of their father the devil. Satan powers them to have that lust of killing, of murdering God's people. Okay, let's go on now and look at the characteristic of the Antichrist, the second one, which is his position. What is he? And we find most of these Antichrists are called kings, princes, as well as King Herod. The Antichrist, a characteristic is he's a worldly, secular leader, but he's also a religious leader, and we're going to look at that right now. We see, again, the Antichrist recognized as either a king or a prince in many places. We already saw the leopard beast. The 7th head of the scarlet beast is a king, but it's also a type of the Antichrist. Gog was the head of Magog. King of Babylon, the little horn of Daniel 7, the little horn of Daniel 8, the prince to come, king of the north, prince of Tyre. The Antichrist will be a world ruler, i.e. known in the Bible as a king or a prince. We see that Herod, of course, the Herods, King Herods, they were called kings. They were a political king over Judea. The first Herod, King Herod the Great, he was over Judea. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. He fulfills that characteristic of the Antichrist, and that these 3 Herods are considered kings. By the way, Herod, literally it means hero. He's called the King of the Jews in Matthew 2 and Luke 1, King Herod that is. He reigned from 37 BC to 4 BC. He was subjected under the Roman Empire, and they were closely related to the worldly Roman Empire, which we know is the terrible beast of Daniel 7. But we see Herod was a political king, and he was the king of the Jews until the Roman governors were put in place in Judea at 4 BC, including people like Pontius Pilate. Now, this King Herods, they weren't only political leaders, but they were also religious leaders, spiritual leaders. We see an example, the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, that he, as God, sits in the temple of God. The Antichrist will both be a political leader and a religious leader, showing himself that he is God. And they get so proud that they think they can take over the church. We remember that King Herod the Great was the one that initiated the rebuilding of the temple. He had great interest in that. John 2:20. He was also called by Jesus a fox. That's Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee was called a fox or a false prophet, which because he, by definition, political leaders are forecasting the future. They're saying Here's why you want me. I can do this for you and I can do that. They're false prophets. Pilate sent Jesus to Herod the Tetrarch to try him. He was trying him on religious grounds. Herodians were one of the three religious sects, as we've talked about already. The Herodians counseled with Pharisees to destroy Jesus Christ. Herod is not only a political ruler, but he actually is a religious ruler as well. Now, the third characteristic of the Antichrist is his place, his location. And we know that the Antichrist will be located or operate within the Greco-Roman world, the Grecian Roman world. And we're going to see that that carries over to today. We see that the Greco-Roman origin is widely continued in this day. It was the Roman Empire was in place at the time of Christ. It's the fourth terrible beast, if you will, of Daniel 7. And this Greco or Grecian Roman influence continues to this day. We see it all around us in our politics, our philosophy, culture, architecture, language. It continues today. It was there at the time of Christ. The same types of building, the same type of legal system, the same type of laws. Today it's considered the Western world, which is the Western hemisphere. Plus, it's also Europe and Russia. It's the Greco-Roman origin all these places have in common. And we see, for example, Daniel 8, the little horn, waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. The south and the east, that means he comes from the north and the west, which is the Roman Greco world. The king of the north was one of the four kingdoms from Greece. Daniel 7, the terrible beast. It was the fourth beast, which was the Roman Empire. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7 and 8. The Revelation 13 beast is simply a resurgence of the Daniel 7 terrible beast. It has all the same common features and symbols. And we see how the Herods are very closely aligned. And in fact, they were actually part of the Roman Empire because they worked for them. They were subservient to them. King Herod the Great, he was considered the king of the Jews unto the Roman governors, but he was a subject under the Roman Empire. King Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee, the one that wanted to kill Jesus and killed John the Baptist. We see in Luke 3:1 how he's described. In the reign of Tiberius Caesar, that's the Roman Caesar, Pilate, he was the governor of Judea, and Herod was the Tetrarch of Galilee. Pilate and Herod were almost co-leaders, because one was the governor of Judea, the Roman, and Herod was the supposed king of the Jews. He was one of the sub-rulers of Galilee. Acts 4, against Jesus, both Herod, Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel. We see how closely aligned they are with the Roman Empire. The place, it's the Greco-Roman world. King Herod from Acts 12, not to be confused with the King Herod of Acts 26, which was his son, but King Herod of Acts 12, he had the authority to imprison, execute. He was considered a king. He was a ruler under the Roman Empire. Tyre and Sidon, these places needed Herod for food supply because Herod was part of the empire. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and look at the fourth, and very important, the fourth characteristic of the Antichrist, and that is about pride. First, we see, for example, 2 Thessalonians 2:4, the man of sin, which is a type of the Antichrist, exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The Antichrist will want people to think that he's God, that he's in control of the church, and he's in control of politics. He controls the world. Revelation 13 again, the beast, that leopard beast, all the world wondered after the beast. They marveled. They worshiped the beast. All shall worship him. This Antichrist wants this worship and honor. The little horn, Daniel 8, was magnified himself to the prince of the host, which is Christ. He magnified himself in his heart. The king of the north magnifies himself above every god and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. More than that, we see the king of Babylon and the prince of Tyre, which again are types of the Antichrist. The king of Babylon, thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. King of Babylon is not only a symbol for Satan, but is also a symbol of the Antichrist. Jeremiah 50, I am against thee, talking about King of Babylon, O most proud, the prince of Tyre, because thine heart is lifted up, and thou hast said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas, yet thou art a man and not God. The Antichrist will think that they are a God. And we see that fulfilled in the King Herods, the three kings again, the King Herod the Great. Well, he didn't want to hear that there was another king of the Jews. He tried to destroy the infant Jesus. King Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee, he tried to kill Jesus. He killed John the Baptist. And then we have the classic example in Acts 12, the King Herod that killed James the Apostle and tried to kill Peter. Herod was arrayed in royal apparel. He sat upon his throne and made an oration. The people gave a shout, and the people said, it is the voice of a God and not of a man. Just like those other passages on the other types of the Antichrist, the king of the north, the prince of Tyre, the little horn, etc. The king Herod, he loved it, and immediately the angel of the Lord smote him because he gave not God the glory. And in other words, he was taking it in. He was agreeing that he's a God. So we see these King Herods, how prideful and arrogant they were. Okay, the fifth characteristic of the Antichrist is his plan. His plan about persecution, persecuting God's people. That's the nature of the Great Tribulation. His lies and deception, his sin and lawlessness, his idolatry. So we're going to go ahead and look at a couple of these things just to show that the King Herods meet the plan of the Antichrist. Okay, the plan of persecution of Christ and God's people. We've already seen that. We've already talked about King Herod the Great. Tried to kill the infant Jesus. Killed the infants of Bethlehem. King Herod the Tetrarch wanted to kill Jesus. He actually was involved with trying Jesus when he was in Jerusalem with Pilate. He mocked him and he sent him back to Pilate. He killed John the Baptist. King Herod killed James the Apostle, wanted to kill Peter. The persecution of Christ and God's people. Lies and deception of the Herods. The King Herod the Great, he lied to the Magi, or quote unquote the wise men, that he wanted to worship the infant Jesus. He didn't want to worship him, he wanted to kill him. King Herod the Tetrarch of Galilee, that's the one Jesus called him a fox. And a fox symbolizes lying, false prophets. Ezekiel 13 verse 3 to 6, please read that. And then the third one, King Herod again, he was called a god by Tyre and Sidon and didn't give God the glory. He was lying. He said, yeah, I'm the God. Okay, just a quick summary of this video. We see that these three King Herods are a type of the Antichrist. They actually existed, they're historical figures, but they were just a type of the Antichrist. This gives us information so when the Antichrist appears, which is very likely soon to happen, and the Great Tribulation gets underway in full, when we see these three kings, they were against Jesus as the Christ. They didn't think he was the prophet, priest, or king. They wanted to put him to death. We see the power of the Herods. For example, the dragon in Revelation 12 stands before the woman ready to devour her child. And we find that it was King Herod that was used for that. The position, the authority. The Herods were a king, but they were a religious ruler. They were called foxes. They were false prophets, but they were also a political ruler within the Roman Empire. And that was their place. They functioned within that Roman Empire, which is a fulfillment of what other Antichrist types are in the Bible. Their pride. They think that they're the king. They think that they're above Christ. The one in Acts 12, the King Herod, he accepted worship as God, and God slew him for that. And their plan, the persecution of God's people, the deception, lies, the sin, lawlessness, and idolatry, we see that the Herods are a type of the Antichrist. Please consider subscribing to this channel, and thank you very much for watching this video.